In this video we will show you how you can create an item. So, as an example, we will set up an item for single private landing permit. Click on the Add New Item button. Then start by selecting the item family that defines this permit item, such as the application category, in this example as permit, the authorization type as landing, the item type as single, and finally the item nature, which is private. The name of the permit item is generated automatically after selecting the item family. As you may have noticed, under authorization type we only have landing, under item type we only have single. Thus, at this point we won't be able to create items having different authorization or item type, such as single overfly cargo permit or any block landing permit. For that reason, what you need to do is create an item family for these permit types, and then set up the permit item. So, if you haven't created the item family to which your permit item belongs, please go back to the settings page and then go to Create Item Family section and create the item family, before coming back to this section to set up your permit item. Now, we will continue the setup. Any new permit item is active by default. This means this permit item will be available to the applicants as soon as it's saved. The Auto Approve setting applies specifically to this permit item. This means it overrides the general setting. So when the general setting of application auto approval is enabled and the auto approve setting in the item is disabled, the system won't approve the permit applications related to this item. Therefore, the applications should be manually approved. In this example, we want the system to auto approve all single private landing permit applications, so we will keep it enabled. The same applies to auto issuance. So, by default the auto approval and auto issuance settings in the item are enabled. This means all related permit applications will be auto-approved when the requirements are met and the permit number will be auto-issued. But since in this example we want the system to approve the single private landing applications, without having to auto-issue the permit number, we will disable the auto-issue setting to issue the permit numbers manually. You can find the general settings related to the auto-approval of the applications or auto-issuance of the permit in Main Settings under Automated Actions section. The option Freeze item can be used to temporarily restrict applicants from applying to this specific type of permit. When this option is set to Yes, a message box will appear where the CAA can enter a message that will show to the applicant when this permit item is selected. In case you wish to set a schedule to specify when this item should become restricted, you need to select Scheduled to set the start date and end date. In this example, this permit item is available for all applicants. Therefore this item is not freezed. Now, we will set the requirements of this permit item. The additional fields listed here in this section are added in the Main Settings under Programmed Components section. Therefore, you can add additional fields related to single flights to request from the applicant any additional information related to the flight schedule. In this example, we will select PAX, so that the system adds a new field to the application that requires from the applicant the number of passengers while filling in the schedule. The rest of the options available under Programmed Components section are built in the system, therefore don't require any setup from your side. If needed, you can simply select them while creating an item. If the applicant is allowed to request more than one permit in one application, you can select Yes. The options Yes and No will override the default setting configured in Programmed Components section. This means if the default is set as No and you want to allow applicants to include more than one permit in their application, then you should set it as Yes. In this case the applicant will be allowed to request more than one permit only when applying for a single private landing permit. The permit number can be issued per application. This means one permit number should be issued for the whole flight schedule. Per day, one permit number will be issued for each operating days, regardless of number of flight sectors that will be operated per each day. If per sector, means one permit number will be issued for each flight sector. In this example we'll set it as per application, because we want to grant only one permit number per application. The built-in options available under Programmed Components change based on the item type. For example, when the item type is block, other settings related to the flight details will show. The section Documents and Forms is divided into departments and under each department the relevant documents and forms are displayed. These documents and forms are added by the CAA in the main settings prior creating an item. We will proceed by selecting the documents related to operator, aircraft or any additional form that this permit item requires. In this example, for a single private landing permit, the Flight Safety Department requires the Certificate of Airworthiness and Certificate of Insurance. The Air Traffic Management Department requires the details of the receiving party. The departments showing here play an important role in approving any newly created item or any change to the item when multi-level approval workflow is enabled. We will talk about the approval workflow in another tutorial video. Now, we will set the processing time frame based on different urgency levels. Let's say this permit item has 2 levels of urgency. Standard is already there by default, therefore we will add urgent. We will select it from the drop-down list and then click the Add button to add additional fields that will allow us to set the processing time frame of this level and its price. A standard permit should be submitted 72 hours prior to the flight, and 24 hours prior to the flight if urgent. We will continue setting the processing time frame. We will define a deadline to the department or person in charge to approve or reject the documents or forms. For example, 10 hours after receiving the application, if it's standard, and 5 hours if urgent. Also, we will give a deadline to the department in charge to issue the permit or reject the permit application. For example, 12 hours from the approval of the documents if the item is standard, and 6 hours if urgent. Now, we will set the time frame for auto-approving a permit application. This will apply only when the auto-approval is enabled for this item and the requirements are met. For example, the system will auto-approve a standard permit application 36 hours after submission, and 12 hours after submission when it's an urgent application. Finally, the automatic rejection is to define when the system should reject the application in case the applicant didn't comply with the requirements. For example, 2 hours prior the estimated time of departure if the application is standard and the 1 hour prior flight if it's urgent. The automatic rejection time frame can be set only when the general setting related to the rejection of the application, an automated action section is enabled. To remove an urgency level, you can click on the bin icon. In this section, the system may notify by an email the responsible parties mentioned here, when an event takes place or when an action is taken, for example when new application is submitted or the documents are checked by the CAA employees. Under No Action Taken, you may define the recipients that should be notified by the system when an action exceeds the defined condition or threshold, and require immediate attention or action by the responsible parties mentioned here. In this example, we will add the email address of the employee who supervises the issuance of the permits to be notified when the documents are not checked by his team based on the time frame set here. Now that we have set the time frame and the additional notifications, we'll define the validity period of the issued permit, for example, 72 hours. This means the permit will be valid for up to 72 hours, starting from departure time of the first leg entered by the applicant. We will determine the fees for each level of urgency, for example €100 if standard and €150 if urgent. By default, the default navigation pricing profile is selected. In case you wish to set a different pricing that will apply specifically to this permit item, you can select a different pricing profile from the list. The pricing profiles listed here are predefined by the CAA in navigation settings. Also, the navigation fees will apply only when the navigation calculator is enabled in navigation settings. Now that we have set all the requirement for single private landing permit, we will save the item. To enhance transparency, once the item is saved, by default, the submission deadline, permit validity, permit fees and the required documents will be published on the public pages of the website. This table can be filtered based on the item family, the status of the application, whether this permit item is freezed or not. Or you can simply filter as by typing the name of the permit item you are looking for. In this example we will filter based on the item type and item nature. Here is the item that we have created. I hope this video was helpful. Thank you for watching.